We have a full house today. That's why it took so long for us to get all of you seated. We're really glad to have you here. My name is Retha Powers. I'm the director of the Langston Hughes Festival. And before we bring Jacqueline Woodson out, we're going to see a short video that highlights something we hope you'll come back for. It's the Langston Hughes Choral Speaking Festival, where every year students like you from all over the city get to recite Langston Hughes poetry, do performances. It happens in the spring. There's flyers that you'll get on the way out. And after you see the video, then Chuck Fry, the director of the Choral Speaking Festival, will say a few words, and then we'll bring out our special guest. Thank you.
There are words like freedom, sweet and wonderful to say. On my heartstrings, freedom sings all day, every day. There are words like liberty that almost make me cry. If you had known what I know, you would know why.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to City College, Aaron Davis Hall, and the Langston Hughes Festival. First of all, if you have a cell phone, turn it off or put it on vibrator. Very good, thank you. Gentlemen, I see gentlemen with hoods and hats on. Gentlemen do not wear hoods and hats indoors. Before I had this job, I was the dean of students next door at A. Philip Randolph High School. So let's get those hats and hoods off now. Good. Now let's have some fun. As Ms. Powers said, I'm the coordinator of the Langston Hughes Choral Speaking Festival. The flyers for the teachers are out in the lobby. The festival is Thursday, May 26th. We hope to have all you guys back for that and do performances like the two that you just saw on stage. It's a great festival. We have gifts for all the students. You get bags, you get T-shirts, and some other goodies. So we hope to see you here with your parents and your teachers and administrators. Does anybody have any questions? No? Good. How many days are there till Thanksgiving? 6. If you're ready for Thanksgiving, clap once. Very good. If you're ready for Christmas, clap twice. Okay, just want to make sure you guys are paying attention. Okay, let's get Ms. Powers back out here and get this program started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. We hope to see you here in May. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jacqueline Woodson, the 2015 Langston Hughes Medal winner. Jacqueline Woodson was born in Columbus, Ohio, and grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and Brooklyn, New York. She is the author of more than 30 books for children and young adults, including From the Notebooks of Melanin Sun, Miracles Boys, Hush, Locomotion, Showway, Each Kindness. That's I put that in my personal favorite. After Tupac and Dee Foster. And her recent book, Brown Girl Dreaming, has won a tremendous number of awards. She was, yes, amazing and beautiful book. Jacqueline Woodson was recently named Young People's Poet Laureate by the Poetry Foundation. Like Langston Hughes, Woodson is a prolific writer in many genres, including fiction, poetry, drama, and opera even. Ms. Woodson also shares with Hughes a wide readership among young readers, as evidenced by our attendance here today, and she's taught in schools all across the country. In an interview, Woodson said that when she read Langston Hughes as a child, quote, "It was the first time a poet spoke to me and I understood them. And I feel like he kind of opened up the floodgates to me, to understanding that inside poems were stories and messages and language that mattered." Please help me welcome the 2015 Langston Hughes Medal Award winner, Jacqueline Woodson.
Good morning. So I saw some of you when I was running down 137th Street with my suitcase, trying to get here before you. It's so good to be here. It's such an honor to be receiving the Langston Hughes Medal today and this evening. It's interesting because you look at me and you see a grown-up, and I think a lot of young people don't think about us as once being children. And to be standing here and receiving a medal for a poet I read as a kid makes me think a lot about the dreams we have. And I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in a neighborhood called Bushwick, and from a really young age, I was saying I wanted to be a writer, but there weren't writers in my family, so my mom, I grew up with my mom and my grandma, and they were basically like, get a job, stop talking about that writing thing. But the writing was the dream I had, and I knew that no matter what else happened, I was going to keep writing, whether or not someone ever published a book, whether or not someone ever listened to a poem I wrote. I just wanted to write because I loved writing. And so I'm gonna start by reading the opening of Brown Girl Dreaming, which is the Langston Hughes poem. And it was the first poem that I read by Langston Hughes that I understood. I was a kid who read really, really slowly. And I struggled with the reading. I struggled with big words. I struggled with comprehension. And I just struggled with getting to the end of a sentence. And I really struggled with poetry, because I thought poetry was some secret code that only some dead guys understood. And it wasn't until I came across this poem that I understood it clicked for me. Poetry was something that we could all understand. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams go, hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow. The only word I didn't know was barren, and so I looked it up and I saw that it was a field that was just had nothing on it but the snow, and I just had this sense of this very bleak, open field. And because I lived in Bushwick, I kind of had an idea of what a field was, but I wasn't so sure. But I read that poem, and I understood. And I understood that you could write poetry and you could read poetry that spoke to you. So this is from my book, Locomotion. And Locomotion is a novel about an 11-year-old kid growing up in Brooklyn. He's in foster care, and he's been separated from his sister. He lives with his foster mom, Miss Edna, and his parents have died. And he's in 5th grade, he's a struggling student, and his teacher introduces them to poetry. And he realizes that he can write poetry, and poetry can tell his story. And his full name is Lonnie Collins Motion, but his nickname is Locomotion. This whole book's a poem, because every time I try to tell the whole story, my mind goes, be quiet. Only it's not my mind's voice, it's Miss Edna's over and over and over, be quiet. I'm not a loud kid, I swear. I'm just me, and maybe sometimes I make a little bit of noise. If I was a grown-up, Miss Edna wouldn't be saying, be quiet all the time, but I'm 11, and maybe 11's just noisy. Maybe 12's quieter. But when Miss Edna's voice comes on, the ideas in my head go out like a candle, and all you see left is this little string of smoke that disappears real quick before I have a chance to find out what it's trying to say. So this whole book's a poem because poetry's short. And this whole book's a poem because Miss Marcus says, write it down before it leaves your brain. I tell her about the string of smoke thing, and she says, good, Lonnie, write that. Not a whole lot of people be saying good, Lonnie, to me. So I write the string of smoke thing down real fast, and Miss Marcus says, we'll worry about the line breaks later. Write fast, Lonnie, Miss Marcus says. I'm thinking, yeah, I better write fast before Miss Edna's voice comes on and blows my candle idea out. And this is called Pigeon. This is also from Locomotion. So I live in Brooklyn, and from the time I was a really little kid, I always hated pigeons. And I know you're not supposed to hate stuff, but I hate pigeons. And so I decided that my character was going to hate pigeons too. People all the time talking about how much they hate pigeons because pigeons fly by and crap on their heads. And then somebody always goes, that's good luck, so you don't feel all stupid going through your pocket trying to find a tissue to wipe it off. And you never find a tissue because you don't be carrying tissues like some old lady. So you got to walk up to some old lady with that pigeon poop on your head, and she just goes, don't worry, son, that's good luck. Like everybody else, and it makes you hate those sky roaches because they're everywhere in the city. So if you see one, you better duck or else, but this guy, Todd, that lives next door to Miss Edna's house, has a pigeon coop on his roof. And sometimes I go up there and watch Todd wave in this huge white sheet back and forth till all the pigeons come swooping and flying above us, up and down, making those croaking pigeon sounds. Those days, I'm not scared about pigeon poop on my head because the way they fly, all slow above us, and Todd's brown face all broken out in the biggest smile you ever seen on a teenager, all of that stuff makes you look up in the sky and believe in everything you ever wanted to believe in. And this is from my book, The Other Side. So I write a lot of picture books. I write a lot of middle grade books. I know y'all didn't even know I wrote The Other Side, right? So how many of y'all, oh, there it is. Thank you. So The Other Side is a book I wrote about, I don't know, 13 years ago. Oh my goodness. The thing about The Other Side, whenever I write picture books are written in a poetic form. Sometimes it's free verse, sometimes it's more, sometimes it might be more of a sonnet or a different form. But I always, when I'm writing picture books, I'm conscious of everything. The line breaks, the way the words sound from the very beginning to the very end. And one of the great ways of understanding poetry is to start with picture books because the pictures help you get a sense of what the author is trying to say. So this is from The Other Side. That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it, and white people lived on the other. And Mama said, don't climb over that fence when you play. She said it wasn't safe. That summer, there was a girl who wore a pink sweater. Each morning, she climbed up on that fence and stared over at our side. She never sat up on that fence with anyone. That girl didn't. Once, when we were jumping rope, that girl asked if she could play, and my friend Sandra said no, without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no. That summer, everything and everyone on the other side of that fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama how come, she said because that's the way things have always been. Sometimes when I went into town with my mama, I saw that girl with her mama. She looked sad sometimes, that girl did. Don't stare, my mama said. It's not polite. It rained a lot that summer. On rainy days, that girl sat up on that fence in a raincoat. She let herself get all wet and acted like she didn't even care. Sometimes I saw her out there in puddles, splashing and laughing. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. That's why I bought you rainy day toys, my mama said. You stay inside here where it's warm and safe and dry. But every time it rained, I always looked for that girl. And I always found her somewhere near that fence. Someplace in the middle of the summer, the rain stopped. When I walked outside that morning, the grass was damp and the sun was already high up in the sky. I put my arms in the air. I felt brave that day. I felt free. I got close to that fence and that girl asked me my name. Clover, I said. My name's Annie, she said. Annie Paul. I live over yonder, she said. By where you see the laundry. That's my blouse hanging on the line. She smiled then. She had a pretty smile. And then I smiled and we stood there staring at each other, smiling. It's nice up on this fence, Annie said. You can see all over. I ran my hand along the fence. I reached up and touched the top of it. A fence like this was made for sitting on, Annie said, and looked at me sideways. My mother says I shouldn't go to the other side, I said. Well, my mama says the same thing, Annie said, but she never said nothing about sitting on it. Neither did mine. That summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence, and when Sandra and them looked at us funny, I just made believe I didn't even care. Some mornings, my mama watched us. I waited for her to tell me to get down before I break my neck or something, but she never did. I see you made a new friend, my mama said one morning, and I nodded, and mama smiled. And that summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence and watched the whole wide world around us. One morning, Sandra and them were playing rope against the fence, and we asked if we could play, and Sandra said, I don't care. And when we jumped, me and Sandra were partners the way we used to be. And when we were too tired to jump anymore, we sat up on that fence, all of us, in a long, long line. Someday somebody's gonna come along and knock this old fence down, Annie said. And I nodded, yeah, someday. So this is from Brown Girl Dreaming. And I've chosen the sections to read from this so Brown Girl Dreaming, for those of you who don't know, is a memoir, and it's my story of growing up, being born in Columbus, Ohio, then moving to Greenville, South Carolina, then to Brooklyn, New York. And it's written in verse, and it's all the memories of my childhood, especially how I became a writer. And throughout the book, there are haiku. There are 10 haiku and each one is numbered, and they're called How to Listen. And basically, if you pull the haiku out, they're lessons on how to tell stories and how to become a writer. Birch Tree Poem. Before my teacher reads the poem, she has to explain. A birch, she says, is a kind of tree. Then magically, she pulls a picture from her desk drawer, and the tree is suddenly real to us. When I see birches bend to left and right, she begins, across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think. And when she reads, her voice drops down so low and beautiful, some of us put our heads on our desks to keep the happy tears from flowing. Some boys been swinging them, but swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. And even though we've never seen an ice storm, we've seen a birch tree, so we can imagine everything we need to imagine forever and ever, infinity. Amen. Birches is a poem by Robert Frost. Stevie and me. Every Monday, my mother takes us to the library around the corner. We are allowed to take out 7 books each. On those days, no one complains that all I want are picture books. Those days, no one tells me to read faster, to read harder books, to read like my sister Dell. No one is there to say, not that book. When I stop in front of a small paperback with a brown boy on the cover, Stevie, I read, one day my mama told me, you know you're gonna have a little friend come stay with you, and I said, who is it? If someone had been fussing with me to read like my sister, I might have missed the picture book filled with brown people, more brown people than I'd ever seen in a book before. The little boy's name was Stephen, but his mama kept calling him Stevie. My name is Robert, but my mama don't call me Roberty. If someone had taken that book out of my hand, said, you're too old for this, maybe I'd never have believed that someone who looked like me could be in the pages of the book, that someone who looked like me had a story. When I was growing up, my uncle was incarcerated. And every month we would go upstate to visit him. And when he came home, he had become a Muslim. He had become part of the Nation of Islam. And he would kneel toward Mecca to pray. So he's in here. This is called The Promised Land. When my uncle gets out of jail, he isn't my uncle anymore. He is Robert the Muslim and wears a small black kufi on his head. And even though we know we witnesses are the chosen ones, we listen to the stories he tells about a man named Muhammad and a holy place called Mecca and the strength of all black people. We sit in a circle around him, his hands moving slow through the air, his voice calmer and quieter than it was before he went away. When he pulls out a small rug to pray on, I kneel beside him, wanting to see his Mecca, wanting to know the place he calls the Promised Land. Look with your heart and your head, he tells me, his own head bowed. It's out there in front of you. You'll know it when you get there. How many of you have read a book I wrote called Feathers? And finished it? So have you ever read the story of the selfish giant? Feathers was inspired by the book The Selfish Giant. And this poem is called The Selfish Giant. Do you remember the Jesus boy in feathers? Okay. The Selfish Giant. In the story of the selfish giant, a little boy hugs a giant who has never been hugged before. The giant falls in love with the boy, but then one day, the boy disappears. When he returns, he has scars on his hands and his feet, just like Jesus. The giant dies and goes to paradise. The first time my teacher reads the story to the class, I cry all afternoon, and I'm still crying when my mother gets home from work that evening. She doesn't understand why I want to hear such a sad story again and again, but takes me to the library around the corner when I beg and helps me find the book to borrow, The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. I read the story again and again. Like the giant, I too fall in love with the Jesus boy. There's something so sweet about him, I want to be his friend. Then one day, my teacher asked me to come to the front and read out loud, but I don't need to bring the book with me. The story of the selfish giant is in my head now, living there, remembered. Every afternoon as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden, I tell the class. The whole story flowing out of me right up to the end where the boy says, "These are the wounds of love. You let me play in your garden once, and now you can play in my garden, which is paradise." How did you do that, my classmates asked? How did you memorize all those words? But I just shrugged, not knowing what to say. How can I explain to anyone that stories are like air to me? I breathe them in and let them out over and over again. Brilliant, my teacher says, smiling. Jackie, that was absolutely beautiful. And I know now that words are my tangoleo. Words are my brilliance. I'm going to read one more One thing I think is so important as young people, and I can't say this enough, is that you find the thing you love and do it. Because so much is not promised to us, and I've met so many people who have jobs they don't love, and they are stuck doing those jobs for the rest of their life. And from a really, really, really young age, I loved writing. And since nothing is guaranteed in the job market anyway, you might as well choose the thing you love doing and take the chance with it. So I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and for those of you who know, witnesses are not allowed to do a lot of things. So I'm actually going to read two last ones, and this is called Because We're Witnesses. No Halloween, no Christmas, no birthdays. Even when other kids laugh as we leave the classroom just as the birthday cupcakes arrive, we pretend we do not see the chocolate frosting, pretend we do not want to press our fingertips against each colorful sprinkle and lift them one by sweet one to our mouths. No voting, no fighting, no cursing, no wars. We will never go to war. We will never taste the sweetness of a classroom birthday cupcake. We will never know the bitterness of a battle. And this last one is called Maybe Mecca. There is a teenager on our block with one arm missing. We call him Lefty, and he tells us he lost his arm in the war in Vietnam. That's a war, he says. Y'all lucky to be too young to go. It doesn't hurt anymore, he tells us when we gather around him, but his eyes are sad eyes, and some days he walks around the whole block, maybe 100 times, without saying anything to anyone. When we call, "Hey, Lefty," he doesn't even look our way. Some evenings I kneel toward Mecca with my uncle. Maybe Mecca is the place Lefty goes to in his mind when the memory of losing his arm becomes too much. Maybe Mecca is good memories, presents and stories and poetry and arroz con pollo and family and friends. Maybe Mecca is the place everyone is looking for. It's out there in front of you, my uncle says. I'll know it when I get there. Thank you.
So good morning again. My name is Norval Solon. I'm the Associate Director of College Now here at the City College of New York, and I am on the planning committee for the Langston Hughes Festival. And I'm just going to guide you through the remainder of the program, which is going to be a question and answer period. And what we're going to do is, if you have a question that you would like to ask Ms. Woodson, I'm going to ask you to come down to the bottom of either one of these two aisles. There's a microphone there, and Ms. Collins is here to assist you at this microphone, and Mr. Fry, where's Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry, where are you? Okay, so Mr. Fry will be, hopefully soon, at the bottom of this aisle to help you ask your questions to the microphone. So if you have a question you would like to ask Ms. Woodson, I want you to come on down right now. There is a microphone down there. Come on down, and
And there's one.
But I want to warn you. Hold on a second. Please listen. Please listen. Hold on a second. Okay, I'll wait while you quiet down. Ladies and gentlemen, we need for it to be quiet so we can hear the questions.
I am ready.
Okay. We're
I
not
love
ready because there's still too much talking, so we'll wait while everyone gets quiet.
Good luck with that one.
I'll point at them. Okay, we cannot start because there's much too much noise. Please stop talking. Please stop talking. Please stop talking. Please stop talking. Okay, so we have one problem, and that is we don't have a lot of time. So I'm warning you now. I see a lot of people lined up to ask questions. I'm warning you now, we're not going to be able to listen to everyone's questions. Okay, so I'm going to apologize to you ahead of time if we don't get to listen to your questions. All right, does everybody understand that? Okay, so please listen. If you're not asking a question, you shouldn't be talking. Please listen to the question and then listen to the answer. Ask your question quickly but clearly, and we'll try to move along as quickly as we can. So let's start right here with this line.
Was writing your first passion?
Yes. It was writing and basketball.
Good morning. When you told your parents that you wanted to write, what did they say? Did they just put you down?
No, they didn't put me down. When I told my mom and grandma that I wanted to be a writer, they said it was a nice hobby, but I should think about something that was more realistic.
Ms. Collins?
How do you come up with ideas for your books?
How do I come up with ideas for my books? Well, there's a saying that if you survive kindergarten, you have enough to write about for the rest of your life. So there's no such thing as writer's block. There's no such thing as I don't have an idea, because there are so many things happening to us every single day. You get up in the morning, and things happen from the minute you open your eyes, and so ideas are everywhere. So I just have a ton of ideas in my head.
Mr. Fry?
What inspired you to write books?
What inspired me to write books? When I was a kid, I got in trouble for lying a lot. And I had a teacher who said, instead of lying, write it down, because if you write it down, it's not a lie, it's fiction. So that was a big inspiration.
Ms. Collins?
How was it like making your first and second book?
The first book was hard because I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to finish it, but the second one was a little bit easier because I knew I had finished a book, so I knew I could do that. So I love beginning books, and I love finishing them. I don't really love writing the middle part.
Good morning.
Morning.
In the book Each Kindness, what happened to Maya?
I don't know, you tell me, but I bet Chloe's going to be nicer next time. Maya was okay. You know, one thing about Each Kindness, and it's something to think about when you're writing, Chloe was not kind to Maya, but Maya, remember, there were 2 points that I was very conscious about putting in. When Maya comes back, after none of the girls will play jacks with her, she says, I bet you can't guess who the new jacks champion of the world is. And she shows them, look, I don't need you. If you're not going to play with me, I'm going to be okay. And the other instance is when she's jumping rope, she brings this double Dutch rope, and the girl, she looks over and sees the girls laughing, and she knows they're not even going to play with her. So she rolls the rope around her hand, and it says Maya jumped around the whole schoolyard without stopping. She didn't look up once, just jumped, jumped, jumped. And Chloe's kind of mesmerized by that. And it's again showing Maya's strength, that even though the girls are being unkind to her, that she's a very strong person. And I was very conscious to make that a part of the character, so I didn't just put one victim on the page and one bad guy.
Ms. Collins?
What made you become a writer?
What made me become a writer? I love writing.
Good morning. In Each Kindness, did Miss Albert too know about kindness?
She did, and that's why she gave the lesson on kindness in the book. I think she had a sense of some of what was going on in the class, and that was her way of kind of making all the kids see this is what kindness does. It ripples out into the world.
What gave you the idea to write the book called Each Kindness?
What gave me the idea for Each Kindness? I think just realizing that sometimes I feel like all of us have at some point been Chloe and at some point been Maya. And I had never seen a book that really represented someone being unkind from the unkind person's point of view, just from the person who the person has been unkind to. So I wanted to write a story about the lasting effects of unkindness and the lasting effects of kindness. And the fact that sometimes we do something mean and we think, oh, tomorrow we're going to be able to make it right. And tomorrow's never promised. There's not a promise that tomorrow we're gonna have that chance. So we should never assume it, and we should do what needs to be done today.
It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, did you get your other books from other people's lives in your lives, or is just your imagination?
So much of my books are fiction, and they're realistic fiction, so they're not necessarily based on people I know, but they're sometimes based on memories I've had or things I've seen in the world, but not necessarily my own life.
Okay. What inspired you to write the book Michael's Boys?
What inspired me to write the book Miracles Boys? Did you read Miracles Boys? So I wanted to see if I could write a book with no girls in it. And so I started writing Miracles Boys, and their mom's name is Milagros, which is, miracles. And so I started writing it, and it took me about 3 years to finish that book because I didn't know what I was doing. And they made a mini-series out of it, and it was actually filmed right here on 138th and Convent. The book is better.
Good morning, and my question is, who inspires you to be a poet?
Who inspires me to be a poet? A lot of other poets. I think it's really important to know that if you're writing poetry, you should be reading poetry. If you're writing fiction, you should be reading fiction, fantasy, reading fantasy. But Langston Hughes is a huge inspiration. And so many of the poets that are living today that I read really inspire me.
Was it really hard to think of what to write?
Was it hard to think of what to write? It wasn't hard to think about what I wanted to write, but it was hard to organize my ideas. I remember when I was writing After Tupac and Dee Foster, I was trying to figure out the main character's name. I knew it was going to be about Tupac. I knew it was going to be about 3 girls who were obsessed with Tupac, but I couldn't figure out the main character's name, and then after rewriting it about 15 times, I realized why I couldn't figure that out. So sometimes I figure out this stuff as I'm going along.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
What was the first book you ever wrote?
The first book I wrote that was good, the first book I wrote was when I was 7. It was that collection of poems about butterflies, and I talk about that in Brown Girl Dreaming. Then I wrote a nonfiction book called Martin Luther King and His Birthday that I wrote, and it was illustrated by a guy named Floyd Cooper, and that was not a good book. And then I wrote a book called Last Summer with Mason. That's a good book.
When you wrote a book, did you think the readers would, it would have to do with the readers?
That's a good question. When I write, I'm never thinking about the readers. I'm just thinking about, I always say I write because I have so many questions, not because I have answers. And I never write to teach anybody anything, because if I wanted to do that, I would write textbooks. But I write because I'm trying to figure out, like with Each Kindness, I was trying to figure out, what does kindness look like and what does kindness mean? When I wrote Brown Girl Dreaming, I was trying to figure out, how did I become a writer? I didn't just wake up one day and I was Jacqueline Woodson. You know, a lot of things had to happen for me to get to this point, to be talking to you. So I'm always in my head, and it's not until the book is published and I start hearing from the readers that I really start thinking about the impact it has on other people.
Good morning. When you made the book Lena, did Lena and Dion reunite with their father?
No, and Leona was the sequel to a book I wrote called I Hadn't Meant to Tell You This. And so I Hadn't Meant to Tell You This was the first book, and at the end of that book, Lena and Dion, something happened to them. And then at the end of Lena, I think they end up back with Marie and her dad. So not with their dad.
Thank you.
Good morning. How do you feel about the relationship between police officers and young African Americans?
How do I feel about the relationship between police officers and young African Americans? It's problematic, it's complicated. I think it's a big, big, big question that I wish I had the whole afternoon to talk about. I write about it in my book, If You Come Softly. I write about it in Hush. I write about it in After Tupac and Defrost. I've been writing about it for about 20 years, and it's a very, very complicated, big conversation, so thanks for starting it.
Good morning. I wanted to know, how do you focus on one subject when you're writing a book?
When I'm writing a book, I actually don't focus on one subject. If you notice, the books are, especially with the middle grade books, they're about a lot of different things. And that's because I can't focus on one thing. But they usually only have a few characters, and that's one way to stay focused. When you think about writing, you think about it like a stage. And the more people you have on the stage, the more people you have in your story or your book, the more people you're going to have things happen to. So I keep it very simple, and that helps.
Good morning.
Morning.
If you weren't an author, what would you be doing for a living?
I would be playing for the Knicks. They've needed help for a long time. I got big plans, big plans.
Good morning.
Morning.
What is your advice for people who are trying to write a book?
My advice for people who are trying to write, you can't be a writer if you're not a reader. Read the books you love, read them again and again, learn from other writers, use your library. I lived in my library when I was a kid, basically because I had to go there after school because my mother worked full time and she would pick us up at the library. But, and writing is a muscle, so you have to use it every day, so you have to write every day. Show your writing to people you trust and really believe in it. Really believe that not only do you have a story, but you also have a right to tell your story. So, and we need more writers. We need so many more writers in the world.
That's a good time to interrupt with a question that was sent down from the balcony.
Okay.
And the question is, what kind of books do you like?
What kind of books do I like? I like all, it's a good question. I read a lot of poetry. I read a lot of realistic fiction, obviously, because that's what I write. I read a lot of graphic novels. And now I'm reading more nonfiction. I didn't read a lot of nonfiction, but now I'm reading more of it.
And a follow-up question, how did you become famous?
You think I'm famous?
Well, yeah, look at everybody who came out to see you.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. It's funny because, you know, when I'm on my block, I'm just Jackson and Toshi's mom. Or I can walk out, like y'all, the people who I was walking down 137th Street with, y'all, except the ones I waved to, you all didn't know who I was. You're like, why is that woman waving to us? So I'm famous in the room, and I like that. I like being a little bit anonymous and being, because writers tend to be introverts. We tend to like kind of hide away in our rooms and write. But I do like that I've written so many books that I've lived the dream. That, you know, I had a dream and I was able to make that dream come true. So as cliched as that sounds, it feels good to really deeply believe in doing something and then go out and do it. I just want to pause for a minute. So if I don't get a chance to answer your questions, my website is JacquelineWoodson.com, and if your teachers can just make up a list of questions and email them to me, I promise I'll get the answers to you. So your questions won't go unanswered. They just might not get answered here. So back.
And that's definitely going to be the case because we only have about 5 minutes left, so we're not going to be able to hear everyone's questions, but we'll continue and get in as many questions as possible. Ms. Collins?
I said, if you were on the outside looking in, would you see your books as literature to nurture the human mind?
To nurture?
The human mind.
If I was on the outside looking in, what I see my books is literature to nurture the human mind. Even from the inside looking out, I think all books, if used correctly, can be. Rudine Sims Bishop, this woman, this academic who's brilliant and who has done so much for children's literature, talks about books being mirrors and windows, and people needing books to see reflections of themselves, and that's nurturing, and people needing books to see experiences of other people, and that's mind-growing. So yes, I definitely see my books as being in one or both of those categories at all times.
Mr. Thomas?
Good morning. Who inspires you as a writer?
Who inspires me? Other writers inspire me. My family, my friends, young people inspire me. The world inspires me. Everything.
Ms. Collins?
Good morning. How did you feel when you were finally able to let out your story, like your life in Brown Girl Dreaming?
Oh, how did I feel when that's a really good question, because for so long, I didn't know what was going to become of all those memories I was writing down. And then when I realized that that's the story I was telling and figured out the story, my friend Toshi Regan, who's going to be here tonight performing, really helped me unlock it by putting a context to the world I was growing up in. And that was amazing. It felt amazing when I finally knew where I was going with the book.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Who taught you how to use? Good morning.
Good morning.
Who taught you how to use very descriptive writing?
Who taught me how to use very descriptive writing? It's not so descriptive. I'm what's called a minimalist.
It's deep.
It's deep. Thank you. I don't know. I don't know. I think it just came from writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. I always say I'm not a writer, I'm a rewriter. And I rewrite, I read everything out loud, I go back and rewrite it. And the more you rewrite, the deeper you can dig. And so that's how it got the depth.
That's a lot of writing.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm sorry, we only have time for one more question. I'm very sorry. So let's listen to the last question, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Good morning. How do you feel about the book, The Other Side?
I'm very proud of The Other Side. I love it. I'm happy that it's in the world now. Can we just take one more from each side?
Okay.
Because they came so close.
So one and then one. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And how can your writing change the world?
How can my writing change the world? I think anything that we do passionately can change the world. I think one thing that books do is they help get people to think about stuff differently. And I think that changing minds change worlds.
Okay, and our last question.
Go right ahead. The last question.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to ask you, why is writing your passion so much, and why do you like it so much? Why is it so important to you?
Why is writing so important to me? Because I think we have all different kinds of ways of telling our stories. Some people dance their stories, some people teach their stories, some people write their stories, some people play their stories as a sport, and that story is their passion. And for me, writing is what I think there's such a magic to being able to have something like writing. You only need, it's a very inexpensive thing. You only need some paper, you only need a pencil, and you need your ideas, and that's all you need. You don't need any expensive equipment. And for me, it feels really accessible. It feels like something I can get to easily. So I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want everybody to point. Everybody point at Jacqueline Woodson. Point at her, and on the count of three, say, "Thank you, Jacqueline Woodson." 1, 2, 3. Okay, remember, JacquelineWoodson.com. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question today, have your teachers or your parents let you get on JacquelineWoodson.com, and you can write your question there, and she says she will answer you. Thank you very much. Let's give one more round of applause for Jacqueline Woodson.